Welcome back to Sensitive and Self-Assured. Before we get to part 2 of my conversation with Trisha Veldman, let me tell you how I know you are in the right place. You feel everything, and somewhere along the way, you started to believe that was the problem. My name is Alyssa, a highly sensitive woman who stopped trying to fix herself and started learning to trust herself instead. This podcast is for the woman who edits herself before she speaks, loses herself in relationships, and still quietly wonders if something is simply just wrong with her. Nothing is wrong with you. Your sensitivity isn't a problem to fix, and self-assurance isn't out of reach. They belong together, and this is where the two meet. This is Sensitive and Self-Assured. If you haven't listened to part 1 of my conversation with Tricia, I encourage you to start there. But if you are jumping in fresh, my guest is Trisha Veldman, confidence coach, spoken word poet, TEDx speaker, and founder of Powerful and Poised. In this half of our conversation, we get into her coaching philosophy and what it really means to be powerful and poised. We talk about her debut poetry collection and a mind-shifting perspective on worry and rumination. Let's dive in. One of the things that you said when we first connected and chatted for a bit was you help your clients with perspective shifts. And that's what we're talking about here, right? We're talking about some perspective shifts. And one of the things that you say is you are the movie star of your life. And I love that so much. So I would love for you to share with the listener a little bit about what that phrase really means to you.
Yeah. So this first occurred to me, not necessarily in those terms, but I was working for a summer at one of those self-serve frozen yogurt shops. They're not very popular anymore, but I don't know if you remember the places where you self-serve your frozen yogurt and then it's paid by the weight. And I was, I think 19 at the time. And I remember one night in particular, there was a line out the door. And so I was moving as fast as I could to check people out, and you have to weigh their yogurt and give them the price. So many people would say things like, oh my gosh, a $7 yogurt, don't judge me, like I'm a fatty or whatever, like and in my head, I was like, I don't care. I do not care how much yogurt you eat. I just want you to get out so I can get to the next person. And it just made me realize how, like, every person there was thinking I was thinking about their yogurt. I did not care as long as they paid me for it. And then, so that was just a helpful realization to put into perspective that we're all thinking about ourselves all the time. And then I had another experience where I was an intern with the speech coaching company, and I was complaining about something, or like, oh, I'm so embarrassed for that thing I said in the meeting 2 weeks ago. And my boss was like, I don't remember what you said. And his analogy that he used was, imagine we took a group photo and we looked at it. Where would your eyes go first? My eyes would go to me. His eyes would go to him. And so then it really clicked for me. And I thought back to the yogurt experience, and it kind of all just made sense. We are all the movie stars of our own lives, whether we want to be or not. We're in this body, and everyone else is a character in our story. And that doesn't mean that we don't care about other people. It doesn't mean we don't pay attention to other people. We do, and how other people affect us does matter. But at the end of the day, no one is thinking as hard about us as we are thinking about us. And if I do something embarrassing, no one's going to bed at night thinking about that embarrassing thing I did except me. And so when we really realize that, I think it takes so much pressure off ourselves to be perfect all the time, because people are likely not even going to remember, especially now when as soon as something happens, move on, let me look at my phone and be inundated with so much content that I don't even remember what happened anyway. But even without the technology, we're just wired to be self-centered.
We absolutely are. And I have had experiences where I have said something and then I've kind of ruminated over it, and I go back to apologize to the other person. And they're like, I don't even know what you're talking about. I didn't give that 2 seconds thought.
I do that all the time. Yeah.
And to your point, so often when we're doing this, this ruminating or thinking about it, we think that it's because we're concerned about what the other person thinks about us. And it is, but it's because of our own internal judgment or fears. And so again, it's still about us. It is not really about the other person.
Absolutely, because I never had a really tiny person say anything about the weight of their yogurt. It was always when people, even if they were fit and healthy, I literally don't remember what they looked like because I literally didn't care. But I would imagine that we say things like that when it comes from our own insecurity versus, oh, I eat whatever I want, I don't care what anyone thinks, type of thing. So that's such a good point that you made.
So our insecurities, they show up in all sorts of ways. And when we start kind of shedding some of those and we grow in our confidence, start showing up in the world in a very different way. And the phrase that you use is powerful and poised. Mm-hmm. Could you share a little bit about what that phrase specifically means to you and what that looks like on a day-to-day and like real life basis, and not just the, very polished version that people might see when you're speaking?
I love that you asked this question because I've been meaning for years to write a blog post about why I came up with the name Powerful and Poised. So when I was in New York City working for a speech coaching company that, like I said, was predominantly men at the time, and a lot of my clients expected me to be like a middle-aged man. I was a 25-year-old woman when I started. And so I realized I was trying so hard to tap into more quote unquote masculine energy. And I was in this doing energy all the time. And I got so burnt out until I realized, after a period of time working with women and hearing their stories, and women in corporate America and New York City who were just trying to be men. And I started doing all this research and listening to podcasts about masculine and feminine energy and having discussions with my female clients, and realized that it is totally possible to be feminine and confident at the same time, even though sometimes it feels like those are conflicting words, like confidence is strong and bold and in your face, and femininity is weak and shy. And that's not true at all, which is a larger discussion about what is masculine, quote unquote, or feminine energy. But at that point, I had started to soften, and I had gotten feedback from clients that, oh, you have such a soft strength. And I started to actually appreciate that about myself. And this was before I learned the term highly sensitive. But anyway, all of this is to say, I was designing a course called Feminine Flair about how to bring your femininity to the workplace and how that's actually an asset. I never ended up creating the course. It never, through the company, there's a lot of things that never happened, but I had the idea for it. And when I was writing the blurb for that course, I wrote a list of adjectives. I forget what the other seemingly opposites were, but it was a list of like this and powerful and poised. And when I wrote it, I was like, oh, I love how that sounds together, because it almost feels like they should be conflicting. And shortly thereafter, I think I bought the domain powerfulandpoised.com and said, oh, one day I'm going to start a blog. And it took me maybe 5 years before I did anything with it. But when I decided to start sharing my poetry, I was like, what should I call my poetry channel? Oh, wait, I already have this domain. So that's how it came about. But really I don't want it to feel like you have to be polished all the time, because that definitely wasn't my intention. And sometimes the word poised, I don't want it to have this connotation that you have to be on it all the time. But it really was meant to say that it is possible to be strong and soft. It is possible to be confident and sensitive. It is possible to have power and be delicate at the same time. And that is something I try to embody, but I think the best way to embody it is to not think so hard about it. So even saying trying to do it, I don't think I try. I think if you're living in a balanced place, it tends to naturally happen. But really, the point of that was to empower women to know that you can be feminine and confident and strong and sensitive and all the things without going too far in either direction and burning yourself out.
I love the word "and" so much. That word and learning this concept of two kind of seemingly opposite things being simultaneously true was just absolutely life-changing for me. And it was before I learned the term a highly sensitive person. And to this day, this idea of I don't have to pick just one, I don't have to fit in a box to fit in, I can have both. And that is true of the things that you were just describing. It is true of hobbies and interests and all of the things that you don't have to just have one. You can have both.
Exactly. So that was the intention of just the juxtaposition between two things that sometimes we feel like, oh, I'm this or I'm that. It's like, we're all fluid, and that's okay. That's actually beautiful.
Yeah. Something else that sounds beautiful. I have not read it yet, but I love the title of it. It is absolutely beautiful. Create and Receive, Make and Believe. Tell us a little bit more about that book. And I'm so curious why you chose to publish it under your performer name, Patty the Poetess.
Yeah, so that book was my first book. It's a book of poems, but in between the poems, there are little paragraphs of reflection and extra thoughts about the theme of the poem. I used a pen name primarily because when I was, I think in 4th grade, I always knew I wanted to be an author of some sort, and I learned the concept of a pen name. I remember being in class and we learned what Mark Twain's pen name was, and I thought all authors had to have one. I thought that was just a thing. So I went home and I told my mom, I said, well, my pen name would be Pat Field. Pat because my name is Patricia, but I go by Tricia. And then Field because in Dutch, my last name, Veldman, means fieldman. And so I was like, it's my real name, but it's a pen name. And then I grew up and I decided I didn't really want Pat Field, but I had a friend that called me Patty and always spelled it Pati. I was like, that's cute. And then I have a friend who's from the Ukraine and she always calls me a poetess. And she writes poetry too. And so she calls herself a poetess. And I was like, that's so beautiful. So I just thought it would be fun and different. And I wanted to honor the little girl in me that always wanted to have a pen name. Trisha Veldman, it's a fine name, but it doesn't feel as poetic and flowy. I've always thought my last name sounded very like clunky and masculine. And so I just wanted something a little more fun. But the book itself it's a collection of poetry that I only started writing poetry about 3 years ago. I've always loved to write, but I went to a poetry review and everyone was doing spoken word. And I was so inspired that literally that car ride home, I started writing poems into the voice memo app on my phone and kept writing poems, spoken word mostly, ever since then. And then I started sharing them online and I started performing at open mics, and I got so much feedback that, oh, the best part about your poetry is your delivery and your performance. So I had no intention of publishing a book because I was like, that would be boring if people like my voice and the way I perform it. But then enough people asked me, well, where can I go back and read that poem, that I decided to go ahead and publish something. So that's how that came about.
I'm excited to read it because I think words are so powerful, and just to get the creativity out and to put it out into the world, I think is just a beautiful thing. And I think it's also interesting that people said that they loved your delivery and, your voice and our voices, sometimes we feel like as highly sensitive women that we are not heard. And whether that is audibly or through written form, whatever the case may be, we don't feel heard. And so what would you say to the highly sensitive woman who is listening right now and feels like her voice doesn't matter?
I think, well, I have a few thoughts because part of my coaching is vocal coaching. So one, this might sound off topic, but literally get comfortable with your speaking voice. So one thing you can do every day is take a big deep belly breath and say, just as loud as you can. I didn't go as loud as I could because I didn't want the microphone to get feedback or something, but just make big sounds in the privacy of your own home, just to get comfortable with your voice and to know that you can be loud, you can take up space. And then as a practical step with other people, I would say just start sharing, whether that's on social media or telling your friends, like, hey, I wrote this note to myself the other day and I thought it was clever. I'm going to send it to you. Or I wrote a poem or whatever. I feel like most sensitive people have a creative outlet of some sort. I think most people, everyone is creative in some capacity. And a lot of people are what I like to call closet creatives. So they don't necessarily know what their talent is, or they don't share it with anyone. But a really powerful thing that I think everyone can do is to, even if it's with one person, just share it. Say, hey, I wrote this, I drew this thing, I baked these cookies with this recipe that I just made up. That's a form of creativity. Or I built this thing, or whatever it is, but sharing it with someone, because you won't realize how powerful your expression is and your voice, even if it's not something verbal that you're sharing. You don't realize how powerful it is until you see its impact on other people. So for 6 months, I was writing spoken word poems to myself. My cat is the only one who heard them. And then once I started sharing and I got feedback from people of, oh, wow, that made me feel something, that prompted me to keep going. I would do it for myself anyway because it's just fun, but I definitely wouldn't do it as often, and I wouldn't be as motivated to get over the anxiety of public speaking and all of those things, or the tediousness of self-publishing a book. It's not, it's not all fun, but I got over it because when you realize that your voice and your art and your thoughts and your ideas and your expression in any form will impact someone else in a positive way, and you take baby steps to start sharing one at a time, then you realize that your voice matters. And I think it's really hard to share when we feel like we're speaking into a void. And even still, sometimes I'm like, why do I bother on social media? I don't have, quote unquote, that many followers, but it doesn't matter, because if one person is impacted, it's meaningful. And if no one's impacted, you at least get the gratification of knowing, hey, I took the step and I shared it. So my advice would be take baby steps, pick one person who you trust, share one thing that feels vulnerable, and do that on a regular basis and see how it feels.
Baby steps. That is the key to pretty much everything, honestly. But for sure, I have personal experience with knowing that the baby steps with vulnerability helps you really expand that. But one of the things that you mentioned that really caught my attention was you said that we are all closet creatives. And as you were talking, it made me wonder if you have noticed for highly sensitive people specifically, if when they are tapping into whatever the creative outlet is that they're kind of hiding in the closet, if that helps process any of the big emotions that we tend to feel any differently than if they're not tapping into that creative side of them.
And I think the most successful artists are known for being very sensitive and known for having extreme lives because they're so sensitive. There's just something that happens with creative expression that doesn't happen through talking it out or through shoving it down, which is never recommended, or even through journaling, which journaling is a form of creative expression, but it's not the same as channeling that into art form. And one fact that I heard maybe over a year ago at this point, but it was just, I thought it was profound. And it actually is what inspired me to start thinking about these closet creatives. I was listening to a podcast with a neuroscientist named Tara Schwartz, I believe is her name. And she cited research that said that even in prehistoric cavemen times, cavemen were creating art. And that was at a time when everything the human species did was for survival, meaning humans did not expend energy if they didn't need to in order to survive. And so the question that the scientist still has said, well, why were they singing? Why were they dancing? Why were they drawing? If that wasn't needed for survival, they wouldn't have done it. And so we don't know necessarily why those were the things they were doing, but it shows that our bodies are biologically wired for creative expression and that we actually at a physiological level need it to survive. And so that's why I said everyone is creative and we're doing creative things all day long without realizing it, but really embracing whatever it is for you and not putting rules and labels on it and just saying, hey, this is the thing I'm doing because it feels good and is fun. I absolutely think that processes these big emotions that highly sensitive people have in a very powerful way. And I think that is why cavemen did it, because it just moves the energy and it gets it out of your system so much more effectively than not doing it.
What incredible insight that the scientist has. I had never really thought about it, but it makes so much sense.
It blew my mind. I was like, oh my gosh, everyone needs to know this. Oh.
Yes, everyone does need to know that. And I know for me, I don't necessarily consider myself a creative person. Like I'm kind of maybe one of those closet people, but I have come to understand that my creative side doesn't necessarily fit the textbook definition, but I most definitely have it. And I know when I am kind of keeping that part of me in the closet. I feel it. I tend to be a little more agitated or frustrated with things because it's not moving. And for me, movement is one of the things. And so like my nervous system is a little more stagnant and, you know, the emotions are stuck, I guess.
Yeah. And I think the term creativity, people tend to think of art or singing, and they're playing piano, but cooking is creative expression. You're hosting a podcast. That is absolutely creative. I'm sure you do the graphics for it. That's creative. Anytime we solve a problem, it's a form of creative energy at work. And one other profound thing that I kind of came to the conclusion of on my own was our worries, our stories. So the stories we tell ourselves are creative energy. Like we're creating a story of, oh my gosh, what if this bad thing happens? And I realized this because I was thinking so much about a boy that I was like, man, with all this pining that I'm doing, I could have written the best romantic novel, but instead of channeling it into writing, I'm just stewing and I'm just thinking over and over and replaying things over and over and inventing scenarios over and over that never happened, but I could have been writing. And that's when I kind of drew the parallel of our worries are creative energy. And so now if I find myself ruminating and telling a bunch of stories, which, you know, highly sensitive people especially fantasize about these things. And now when I start going off on that path, I will try to do something that uses that creative expression in another way, which may be poetry, but it may be taking a walk. A movement, like you said, is so powerful.
What an incredible perspective shift. Oh my gosh, I love that so much. That might be like my favorite nugget of this entire conversation.
I'm so glad because I thought of that in my early 20s. And then I never shared it really, but I think it has helped me so much.
Yeah, we've got to get this episode to every highly sensitive person because they all need to hear that. If they listen to nothing else of this episode, they need to hear that little nugget of our ruminating, this creative energy, and we can shift it into something that is a little more beneficial for us.
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you so much for taking the time to join me today and to share all of your incredible nuggets. If someone listening wanted to learn more about you and the work that you are doing, how can they find you?
So you can find me at powerfulandpoised.com or on Instagram or YouTube. The handle's at Powerful and Poised. TikTok, I think it's just Powerful Poised. I'm not sure why I left out the and. But I would love if we have 45 seconds. There's a poem that as we've been talking kind of came to mind that's like, what's my most HSP poem? And I would love to share it if that's okay.
Go for it.
Okay. I'll take my highs the way I'm given my lows. Extreme, dramatic, keeps you on your toes. I've never done neutral quite right. It's day or it's night, never dusk, never dawn. In this seesaw I'm on, one extreme to the next, and I leave myself perplexed. Am I good? Am I bad? Am I happy? Am I sad? Am I elated? Or am I mad? Consistency I've never had. I'm Jekyll or I'm Hyde. Stability I've tried and failed. That ship has sailed. A sporadic drum sets my beat. No rhythm to my feet. But when I get knocked down, I will never cry defeat. Because I love my highs. So I'll tolerate the lows. I don't mind extreme, dramatic. Keeps me on my toes. So that one, I think a lot of sensitive people can potentially relate to.
I know this highly sensitive person most definitely can. I had goosebumps as you were speaking, and I feel like you completely captured what it is like for a day in the life of a highly sensitive person.
Yep, just up and down and all to every side, but you gotta just embrace it.
Me too, and just kind of ride the wave instead of trying to fight against it these days. Well, thank you again so much for being here, and to all of you listening, until next time, take care.
Thanks for having me.